Queen began life in 1970 when Brian May and Roger Taylor, two members of Smile, a popular student three-piece from Imperial College London, decided to form a new band. Freddie Mercury, an enthusiastic Smile fan and mutual friend, joined May and Taylor as a vocalist and proposed that they should call themselves Queen. The band went through three different bass players before being introduced to John Deacon, who completed the Queen lineup in 1971. After recording their first demo in late 1971, Queen caught the attention of Barry and Norman Sheffield of Trident Productions. Brian and Roger were wary of any potential recording contract after some disappointments during their time with Smile, but Trident offered what appeared to be a good deal. 3 separate agreements covering publishing, recording and management, as well as wages and equipment for the band. Queen signed the contracts in late 1972, though the nature of the agreement raised eyebrows in the music press.
It has to be remembered, in the early 70s, people still thought of rock music as the people's music. It was going to emerge from the back room of a pub somewhere, 4 guys getting together to play the blues maybe, and struggling for several years with no money, and one day perhaps producing a hit record. This was the kind of the slow process of that people thought was the democratic right way to produce rock records. And Queen turned that on its head really by coming out very quickly with a whole package. You know, they had all the ends sewn up. They weren't going to mess around playing in pubs for years, that's for sure, hoping to be spotted by a journalist from Melody Maker or the NME. The way they did it was to produce an album, their first album, with a top producer, get a contract, a powerful management behind them, and the backing of Trident Studios behind them. So it looked to the outsider as if in some way they were a manufactured group. In fact, Melody Maker ran a piece at the time. Unfortunately for Queen, really, this new idea of manufacturing bands, which of course nowadays everybody accepts is the way pop music is created, you know, with Pop Idol. So all pop stars now are considered to be manufactured in some respect. They are sold, marketed and merchandised. All magazines are, all television programs are. So that's not news really. But back in the early 70s it was a bit shocking. They were breaking the rules by appearing to be so well organised.
In summer 1973, EMI released Queen's first single, Keep Yourself Alive. The single flopped, being rejected by Radio 1 5 times and failing to raise much interest.
I remember when Keep Yourself Alive came out, and I thought, fine. You have to remember, in 1973, Britain was still the leader of rock music in the world. The individual ex-Beatles were still recording and having massive international hits. Elton John was the top pop star in the world. Eric Clapton had a comeback. Rod Stewart was a new and amazing vocalist. David Bowie was new, and Pink Floyd put out Dark Side of the Moon. So it was all happening here. And in that context, you can see that Queen didn't initially make that big a splash. Having an all-right record, which would now be grounds for celebration, wasn't good enough then.
It's always difficult to talk about the first single of a band because so few bands hit with the single immediately that defines their career. And with Queen, there is no one track which defines their career. In fact, sometimes the songs defy their career. But Keep Yourself Alive was an interesting start. It was a very good, hard, rocking, driving, anthemic type of song. And the individual flamboyance of Freddie Mercury's vocals came through immediately. The sad thing was, of course, it wasn't a hit. In fact, it was a complete and utter flop.
Keep yourself alive. Are you people? Come on. Let me see it.
Keep Yourself Alive, the whole riff is based around pentatonic boxes, so that's blues. And pentatonic boxes it just refers to a way of playing up the neck, which we'll show in a second. So the riff to Keep Yourself Alive is an interesting use of, as we were saying, the serrated edge of the pick I'm not sure what sound it would be, so we'll use the proper rhythm sound. And it starts in E, and then it goes up to there, which is A flat, which is, I don't know about the saddest of all keys, it's certainly one of the most difficult. So the main riff is digga digga dig, and his rhythm is great, but when the main riff comes in, it's very bluesy, very pentatonic. So it goes like this. We also noticed there as well that we're using the thumb to play the note there. So he's going from E to A flat, G sharp. You see it's not moving at all from there, which is one definition of a pentatonic box. Now the whole riff of there is the rhythm way all the way through.
I suppose it was a good introduction to the band because it, in a way, encapsulated all the good points about Queen, the best things that we remember about them, the vocal harmonies and Brian May's amazing attacking guitar playing. So right away it was a taster for what was to come, and of course people never dreamt that the band would expand in the way that it did. But it was a good record, although even though it wasn't a hit, it served to, it kind of flagged up to the record industry and the public, we're here.
One of the central features of the sound that Queen showcased on Keep Yourself Alive was Brian May's extraordinary guitar. May had built the guitar in 1963 with the help of his father, and it was this custom design that allowed him to find his unique sound.
It was built by Brian and his father. I think they finished it in 66, 67, something like that. And they were both, I mean, Brian's got a PhD in astrophysics, so he's not exactly the thickest man in the world, and nor with his father, apparently. But this is a Burns, it's a Brian May signature model, and it's as close as you can get without spending £5,000 on one built by an Australian guy called Greg Fryer, which you also can do if you want to. What makes it unique are these, which are the pickups. These are Burns Trisonic pickups. They're exactly the same as the one that Brian has in his original. And that would be fine. Burns Trisonic was used by the Shadows, by you name it, any band in the 60s and even the 50s as well. On Brian's guitar and also on this one, they are operated by these switches here. These three are on and off switches. The other thing he's most used to is these, which is an AC30 Vox amplifier, very famous, Shadows, Beatles, The Who, Yardbirds, you name it, Jeff Beck, everybody used these. Brian continues to do so, and part of the way that he gets his sound is he has the thing on full blast. Now, it's only 30 watts, but it is the loudest thing you've ever heard of, so we won't do it very often in there. Now, the other trick to it is this, is that, which is a treble booster. This is a modern one. This is exactly the same as Brian uses, although his is red rather than blue, fact fans. It's built by an Australian guy called Greg Fryer, who has built a lot of copies of the original, as we said, and also maintains Brian's original #1 guitar, did so for the tour that they've just done. So the idea with this is that it boosts this, an AC30 amp, which is quite a clean thing, into full overdrive. And the best thing to do is I'll just show you, shall I? Okay. So, with just this pickup on, and the treble booster all the way off, turn the amp on, yep, all the way off, it sounds like this. No, it's not exactly the Brian May sound that we know. His main rhythm sound is these two together, which is that. So if you have that, again, the treble booster is almost all the way off. The sound you have is this. Now, part of it having these two together warms it up, as we can hear. Compare again the thin sound and the rhythm sound. So we're nearly getting there, we're not quite there yet. So there's two more things to say. For the main sound, this thing's on full, which we'll do in a second. The other thing is his pick, which normally it's a sixpence. An old English sixpence that you can't, as I've discovered, you really have trouble finding them. So this is an Australian 5-cent piece. The reason I'm using this is because it's the same dimensions as a sixpence. Now the main thing with this, Brian uses this to get as close a feeling to his hand to the string as possible. A lot of guitar players use very floppy plastic ones, so you can do that. Brian is the absolute opposite, and that also helps with the sound. It's a very, very emotional, intimate, as you can have between bits of metal, contact between the strings. Now also it's serrated, and I'll show you that as well. But Brian May's main guitar sound is treble booster all the way up. These two pick up together, and both of them are in phase, so I'm not mucking about with any of these switches. And it sounds like this. Very full indeed.
Queen's self-titled debut album was released in July of 1973. The album made little impact with either critics or the record-buying public, though following a successful winter tour in support of Mott the Hoople, a large section of the music press began to reappraise Queen as a band of promise. EMI and Trident felt Queen should make a prompt return to the studio, this time with a sizable budget, and as the band continued to perform Queen 1, they were also developing ideas for their follow-up album, Queen 2.
The first album has the basic elements of what became the Queen sound, but I think they amplified it and exaggerated it, and the bigger and more preposterous it became, the better it became in a way. And perhaps that first album takes itself a little bit too seriously. And the great thing about Queen is they actually came, and this was to me, their redeeming feature, they actually came to have a quite profound sense of their own absurdity.
I think you have to take Queen 1 and Queen 2 almost as a package. Yes, they were recorded at a different time, but it was almost phase 1 of Queen's world domination plan. And whilst I would say Queen 2 shows perhaps a more comfortable and more confident band, knowing exactly where they were in the studio, I don't think that necessarily Queen 1 lets them down whatsoever. I think Queen 1 has some wonderful moments, and I think you put the two together and you have the start of something very special. So I would say yes, Queen 2, inevitably with a band going into their second album, shows more confidence, but Queen 1 is equally as good.
I think with the early albums, the first couple definitely show Queen in a light which they kind of moved away from later on. There are a lot more, if not kind of standard kind of rock-based tunes on there. It's definitely kind of the rock influence that's to the fore, and I think they're great. I mean, the great British buying public kind of took a little while to kind of warm up to them. You know, critics were never that enamoured of the first album particularly. I don't think it even went top 20 over here, so it wasn't an overnight success.
The band resolved to tackle the ambivalence with which Queen 1 had been received by refining a new and dynamic image. They developed Queen 2 in an atmosphere of frenzied creativity, in which Brian's overdriven guitars formed the basis of a more textured sound and fantastical image. Queen's big break came on the 21st of February 1974, when they received an unexpected invitation to perform 7 Seas of Rye on Top of the Pops. EMI rushed out a single within 2 days, and Queen broke into the top 10.